This is the Founders Story segment, and this is the Global Clean Mobility Summit 2024. And we are proud to introduce to the stage this gentleman with over 22 years of experience in technology. He's pioneered electronic waste management solutions across India, the US, and GCC. He has led India to global prominence in the production of HIPCO, single-walled carbon nanotubes, revolutionizing industries such as space, defense, water, and electronics. His breakthrough work at NoPo Nanotechnologies has set industry standards, earning the company recognition as one of the world's top CNT manufacturers. Please welcome to the stage with a big round of applause, Gadhadar Reddy, founder and CEO, NoPo Nanotechnologies Private Limited. Give him a big round of applause while he makes his way to the stage.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. So I'll tell you about my journey. So I'm from Bangalore. So from Micelio's office, I'm just down the road in a village called Sarjapur. I used to spend my childhood with my grandparents. So we used to have discussions about life. It was too early to start those discussions. I was just 7, 8 years old. So and Grandpa had his brothers. So as in an Indian setting, growing up here, the discussions used to be with his brothers also. Each one had a different philosophy of life. So one followed Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, the other followed Ramana Maharshi, the other followed Shirdi Sai Baba, and all three had clashes out because they had a different way of looking at things. The only thing they agreed upon was that everything we live in is a maya, that there's nothing real, that everything is already predefined, there is no free will, so whatever is set is going to happen, so you don't have to do anything. For me, that was the one point I could not agree with them upon, because it did not make any sense. Like, how can we live a life without free will? We should be able to do what we want to do. So while looking at it from this angle and trying to understand, like, okay, as a small kid trying to figure out what is the meaning of life, and what is it that we are doing, and how to make sense of everything, how to make sense of what's going on, and how do we define things. So while looking for answers, I came across books, and one such book that was very interesting is called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. This book was very interesting because it gave stories of people who had made it big in life, and those anecdotes were very interesting. So what I learned from it is that if we set an audacious goal and go after it, then we can bring things together and we can make things happen. So the next search was, okay, what's the audacious goal? What do I look for and where do I look for? Now, as soon as we step outside of the cities, we start seeing these beautiful visions of the night sky. And this was something that was very beautiful that I really liked. And the night skies seemed like the stars looked like they're asking, that they had the answers, like you can just come there. And then I was like, okay, fine. So that's my goal. That's something I want to do. I want to go into the skies. And I want to be able to go beyond the planet. Now, as soon as I started doing that, and we had mathematics classes on probabilities, we were studying Bayes theory. And Bayes theory says that the probability of an event happening given certain other events that need to happen for that. And my probability of going to space with those events started going to zero rapidly. Because there's so many things that need to happen. Like one, India has never gone into space by itself. Like now we're talking of Gaganyaan. This was like 30 years ago. And then we're talking of putting humans in space and then talking of going beyond the planet, going to other planetary bodies like Mars and Venus. Now that's a massive challenge. So I'm like, okay, that's a good challenge to get started with. So let me go for that. So started off by taking up a lot of summer schools. Being in Bangalore, that's another great advantage that we have ISRO headquartered here. We have a lot of space activities happening, so lots of summer schools. So what these taught was that we were trying to study how the sun works and why is the sun even stable and producing light. So the interesting aspect is the only way we can explain this way the sun works is by looking at how atoms behave. The theory of atoms, quantum physics, is crucial to explain why the sun exists. Now this was very interesting that you're looking at such tiny objects and these objects are what are telling us more about how we even exist right now. So as I studied more about these summer schools, they taught me that we have a new field of technology that's emerging called nanotech. And that's, again, based on quantum physics. The same theories that drive the stars are what's used for building stuff. And nanotech gives us the ability to create new materials. So one of the challenges that I came across in this small journey early on was that to be able to go to space regularly, today, as we stand, there have been about 450 people who have gone into space. And this is because, and that's out of almost 10 billion people who have traveled the planet in the last 60, 70 years. And that's because of the materials that we have. We have used everything that nature can provide. We have taken the best out of it. But the most we can get is where we are today with 450 people up there in a still high-risk mission where every 100th mission we can expect one to blow up and should be okay with it, which doesn't make any sense. So to make it safer, we need something that's stronger, lightweight. And this is what led me to this material. The SWCND stands for single-walled carbon nanotubes. So I'll tell you more about what these nanotubes are. So nanotubes are a new material. These are a man-made material that uses our knowledge of material understanding to create this. This is the strongest known material to mankind. It's 100 times stronger than steel is. And along with its strength, it gives a lot of bonus features, such as very high conductivity, its ability to semiconduct. So it's a material that has a lot of properties that are of interest, which we'll get into shortly. And these tubes are just 1 atom thick. The diameters that we're talking about are just 10 atoms. So what we set out to do as a first step was to create this material. This was step 1. Like, how do we create such a material? Now this is where things started off. This is where NoPo started out as a journey to start creating this material from scratch from here in Bangalore. So the first step for creating the material was, okay, so it seemed straightforward. Like, we're talking of atomic structures, we're talking of producing them in large quantities, and we're talking of producing them repeatedly. Now, some of the challenges that exist when we start looking at this was, India, we have never had a history of creating such advanced materials. Maybe a long time ago we created steel, but after that we left out. We never did anything around it. We don't yet make carbon fibers, and I'm talking of making something that's about 7,000 times smaller than a single carbon fiber, developing the technology from scratch and producing it here. So looked at various technologies, studied my engineering here in Bangalore, then did a master's in the US, in Louisiana, and looked at different techniques for making nanotubes. While doing this thorough research, I found one method that looked very promising. It's called HIPCO. So traditionally, the way nanotubes are made is, it's like a process like agriculture. So we plant seeds of atoms in the soil, and then we let nanotubes grow. Then we actually remove all the tubes, then we replenish it and put it back again. The HIPCO process, on the other hand, is something that's a black box. You throw in gases, you throw in catalysts, and you can produce nanotubes. The only challenge is that this process happens at very high temperatures, temperatures that are 3 times that required to vaporize a human body. The pressure is massive. Imagine a kilometer cube of water on your head. That's the amount of pressure that's required, with a corrosive gas that needs to be used in this. And the other reason why HIPCO was very promising for me was HIPCO makes use of carbon monoxide. And that's one ingredient that exists in both of our close planets. Both Venus and Mars are made of carbon dioxide. So we could potentially, if all of this is happening, we could go live there, we could still produce the material and come back here. That was the thought process. So we could use carbon dioxide to produce the material and iron as a catalyst. So the way things happen inside the system is, this is like just a little more R&D, was we take in atoms of iron, and these atoms are heated up rapidly. We go from room temperature to 1,000 degrees. This breaks down the iron particles into single atoms, which then help break down carbon atoms that are then reassembled to form the tubes. The challenge is that you do it again and again repeatedly. This is what we set out to do and solve at NoPo. And we went through a lot of iterations. This was the first iteration of it. What I did was, as a community, we've always interact with our families. We work so closely. So one of the community events, while I was just going for my studies, some of the uncles were there, and they said, you know what, if you want to do something in India, we'll help you out. So I took their word for it and said, okay, now you have promised to help me, you don't have a choice, you have to help me out. So first set up operations in a small garage, in a machine shop. We started by building things. We started building out a system, and we quickly realized that we don't have anything for the ecosystem, like including our heaters, our pressure systems that can handle this. I used to go to anybody who said I've worked with ISRO, and each time it was they used to be somewhere good experiences, but many times it was just failures after failures. It took quite a few tries. It took us over 50 tries, over 5 years, before we were able to produce decent nanotubes that we could actually provide. And what this chart tells is that the nanotubes are good, but this is what it looks like when you look at our microscope. This is at a zoom of over 100,000 times. You start seeing individual tubes. So to be able to just image them, you have to have such a massive resolution just to see the tubes. Now this was something that we were super happy with, okay, so we have accomplished what we set out to do. We have produced the nanotubes. Until this point, this was all R&D, this was all technology. It was all just looking at how do we produce this, how do we create it, how do we figure out the alloys, the heaters, the temperatures, develop the system, make it run, make it withstand these conditions consistently. Now at this point, we were able to establish ourselves as a company that's able to produce the material. In conferences, we used to go show up and say, hey, we are making nanotubes, and it used to be like, okay, so we have someone from the US, someone from Japan, and what is this India here doing here, like suddenly with nanotubes? So that was a proud moment. And then we also had a conference in Germany where one of our Japanese customers said that we make the highest quality nanotubes that are available. That was a highlight of the journey. But at this point, the next phase started, which was, okay, so you have a material. Now, what do you do with the material? So what do you do that's actually commercially viable, that's going to actually make revenues? Just having an amazing material, having developed it, doesn't really take it the whole way. Now, the real question that we started then having to ask is, what can't nanotubes do? So this is a material with just so many different applications, all the way from cancer treatments, to batteries, to electronics, and to spacecraft structures. So this was a material that has numerous applications, like hundreds of them. A total, when we made the list ourselves, we found 135 different applications for the nanotubes. And as we went through that, we were like, okay, so now we have to figure out a way to actually address one or two of these and take them to market. That's where we get to scale this even further, make sure that it meets commercial requirements and not just our R&D goals, which we'd accomplished. So as we reached out to the government as a first phase of support, so one of my conversations with the government had always been that, like when we look at things traditionally, the strongest material, whichever country controls the strongest material, is usually the superpower. So my pitch was simple, like see, Abdul Kalam sir is telling that India has to be a superpower. The only way India is going to be a superpower is if we control production and usage of the strongest known material to mankind. And we have made this material, and we are one of few on the planet that has done that. Now how do we scale this up? So the government said, yes, we can help you out, but we don't really know what to do with in terms of strength. We can help you if you're going to do something that can have a social implication, and that could potentially prevent the Third World War, which is going to be on water. So nanotubes, one of the interesting properties is that they're so tiny that they allow water molecules to pass through them in a single file. They're super tiny tubes that allow water molecules to flow inside them, very similar to a structure that's used by our body cells. So our cellular structures over billions of years have developed a structure called aquaporin, which are tiny tubes that where you put a water molecule, it flows rapidly. So we get membranes that are 100 times better than what we have today. So this was a project that started with the Niti Aayog and the Indian Navy putting in money to create an R&D program to develop these kinds of membranes for use on our ships. We have currently already developed membranes that are twice as better than what's available on the market. Now to develop these membranes, this has been an over 8-year effort now since we started and as we fine-tuned it. And this required a few more developments internally. So these developments involved purifying nanotubes to be able to remove all possible contaminants in the nanotubes. Imagine something that's just 10 atoms in size, few atoms of iron inside it, and we don't want those few atoms of iron. That's the level of purity we are looking at. And an ability to also separate nanotubes by diameter. So what this means is we're looking at tubes of, say, 9 atom diameter, 10 atom diameter, 11 atom diameter, all of the exact same kind. These were two technologies that we had to develop to make these membranes. We'll be coming back to these membranes and why these technologies became very crucial for us. So first would be the people who have been with me on the journey. Dr. Kelly, he was someone who did his PhD on HIPCO. This was his baby. I've adopted it to help grow further. And Kelly is based out of Rice University, and he was a student of a Nobel laureate called Richard Smalley. Smalley discovered the fullerenes that set this field and got this started. Anto has been someone extremely crucial in developing the technology. So he's worked on the parameters, developed the new process as we started out in Bangalore, and developed and solved major issues that helped us stabilize and repeat the process. Arunima joined the team 2 years ago, and she brings in the business sense to the company. So she's a successful entrepreneur herself, a graduate of Indian Institute of Management, then was into private equity, built and sold a company called iGenetic that was into diagnostics. So after she sold her company, just like anyone who has sold a company and is chilling, she went diving. And she went diving to the Andaman Islands. And every time she took a dive, she noticed something, that the coral reefs there were deteriorating. So every time this is happening, it's because of carbon dioxide levels going up that was deteriorating it. And she decided that we have to make an impact on the environment, because if you're not going to be able to do something about it now, we're probably never going to be able to do anything about it. So now, how do we address this? How do we create a solution? And how does nanotubes come into the whole place? So this is where we met through a mutual connect, Ashish Goyal, who's been putting together a climate conscious community here in Bangalore. So we decided to work on that. Like, how do we take this amazing material and how do we fit it into these solutions, and what can we do about it? So one of the interesting things about nanotubes, that massive ability to work in any application, is the ability to improve efficiencies across the board. So everything the nanotubes touch, the efficiency improvements we're looking at are orders of magnitude. And this is something that's incredible of it. So as we started getting this business sense and started looking at the impact that we wanted to do, especially on the environment, with the material that we are producing, effectively from carbon dioxide. And so this was like perfect for us, that we could pursue this further. So we then started trickling down our application list and looked at the use cases. The first use case that we found where it's making a massive difference is actually the batteries. So every new lithium-ion battery that you're buying actually has single-wall nanotubes inside them. The reason for that is nanotubes help improve the battery capacity and help improve the life of the batteries. So the panel's earlier discussion was about how battery life could be limited, but this is doubling it and tripling it. And nanotubes have become an essential ingredient in every battery out there. So the reason we were able to get into batteries is because batteries require a high purity nanotube, which has no contaminants inside it. And this is exactly what we had developed for our work on the water membranes. A nanotube that had very low impurities. So this has allowed us to start pilot scale testing with some of the major manufacturers, both in India and outside. And we are one of 2 or 3 companies on the planet that has supply of the material that's required for these batteries. So that's put us, and that's why we're working with Micelio too, and they've been working very closely to make this happen. Another interesting use case for the nanotubes that's also making a massive impact on the planet is the use in electronics. We're working with one of the largest companies in Taiwan and another in Japan to develop semiconductors from the nanotubes. So this again stems from the work we did on water, where we developed a technique to separate tubes by diameter. A fascinating derivative of this is that nanotubes, as we start separating by diameter, they exhibit semiconducting properties where you can vary the band gap. What this means is you have a new material which has the same band gap as silicon, can make use of the same control circuitry as silicon, but gives a significantly higher performance. The significant higher performance we're talking about are clock speeds that are 2 orders of magnitude higher, and transistor density that is 150 times more than a 2 nanometer node. It's massive increase. We're going to have Moore's law continue for a significantly longer time with nanotubes. What you see here are different colored solutions. Each solution has a different size nanotube. So we now have the technology to produce tubes with such high precision that all of them have the exact same band gap. This has significant implications both on defense and automotive industries, because we suddenly have a material that does not have heating losses. It's able to provide a consistent performance using existing control circuitry. And we have the core ingredient, and the core ingredient is now made here in Bangalore. So these have been the main derivatives that have come out. So we have looked at 2 major markets, started out a journey that looked at creating a material that had never been done before, building out the entire ecosystem. And when I went about telling people that, hey, you know what, we're going to make this material, it was always either move to the US or it's not going to happen. It's impossible to do that. So the name NoPo came from that challenge, saying that, okay, if you can't do it, so if it's not possible, I'll make the company with that name. And now, over the years, as we have developed things, we now call it Now Possible. So that's been my journey from taking a very hard technology to where we are today. And happy to talk more as we go further.
Thank you very much. Please do stay on stage. Requesting Martin David, Head of Business, Micelio Mobility, to please come up on stage and thank our speaker for being a part of us here today. This is the first of the founder story. Like I said, ladies and gentlemen, people of the audience, our first founder story of the day, right here at the Global Clean Mobility Summit 2024. Martin, you have the honor of giving out a tiny token of appreciation to our first founder story of the day, Gadhadar Reddy. Thank you very much for being with us.